Good afternoon. This is Professor Al-Deen for Muslim Network TV and Critical Talk. I was thinking today, well, actually last night, as I watched the pre impeachment trial, that our spiritual selves have taken many hits in this almost a year under quarantine, semi quarantine, readjusting our lives to not a full life in the masjid, not a full life, even at home, as we're constantly in a readjustment mode. We have had programs on politics, on arts and culture, and we've had a few, but I think it's now time to take our spiritual temperature. I have with me today Omer Bajwa, who's the director of Muslim Life in the chaplaincy office at Yale University. He has a graduate certificate in chaplaincy from Hartford Seminary, which has been instrumental in being the first out there to really work with Muslims to train them as chaplains while letting them still be Muslim. And I've been to Hartford, and I can attest to the fact that Ingrid Mattson and some others worked really hard at that. And now Omer is lending his brain to that set of things. So I wanted to start off um, thinking about, what do you think our spiritual temperature is right now?
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you so much, Professor Amina, for inviting me back. It's a fantastic show. It's always such a pleasure to be invited and to be in conversation with you. So thank you. Assalamu alaikum to the audience. It's a fantastic question. It is a very timely question, right? Whereas you said we're coming up on the 1 year mark. We're just essentially weeks away from the 1 year mark of the beginning of the American lockdown for a global pandemic. And what I would say is that, the temperature is quite low by different metrics. Let's put it that way, right? So sort of the big picture is that we're going through what has been an incredibly chaotic and tumultuous American presidency. And we've transitioned from one to the other, but we have the sort of residual mess that's still being cleaned up, so to speak, right? The bizarre and tragic attempted coup, on the national Capitol on January 6th, and all of the evil planning that went into that, and all of the aftermath and the impeachment trials. So that's one thing, right? The other thing is that we have the economy has suffered. So many people have lost their jobs, lost their livelihoods. People struggling to pay the rent, struggling to put food on the table. It's very real. On top of that, we feel very bereft, right? Very orphaned as Muslims from our community. Like you said, massages are closed, community centers are closed. We can't even hug each other, right? We can't even physically see our friends and be with each other. And all of these different things affect us physically, emotionally, psychologically, and for our purposes today, spiritually, right? The outside world has undoubtedly has an impact on the inner world, and vice versa. The inner world also has an impact on how we, engage with the outer world. And so what I would say is the spiritual temperature is, it is quite low, just to reiterate that point. But the beauty of our Deen, and I'll come back to this in a little bit, the beauty of our faith, of our wisdom tradition, is that we have regulating mechanisms, right? And sort of immune system boosters on how to get our spiritual temperature back up.
I love it.
So, we can dig deep on that, inshallah. But that's what I would start with, yeah.
Well, it's interesting because one kind of barometer in the world of health is go get your temperature taken.
Yep.
And that was one reason why I thought about our spiritual temperature for today. And I love your play on it. I just love it. But I find, and you're right, so while it's not mandatory or obligatory that we hug each other, hang out together, do all of that, we have done all of that all the time. And here we are now, almost a year in. I never thought I would be saying that.
Yeah.
and we're dragging ourselves to prayer,
Yeah. Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Where I was listening to you earlier talking about, well, my kids have Quran school. Great intervention in
Hmm.
the craziness, right? And a lot of kids are doing either Adam's World or
Hmm.
Nora Kids. They're
Yeah.
doing, we're connecting them. But what about us?
Hmm.
I mean,
Fantastic
we
question.
are really, it's like at first, the first 6 months, it was, Allah, do you think this can be over now?
Yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
Now is, uh,
Hmm. Undoubtedly, undoubtedly, it's all too real. I mean, thank you for just putting it out there like it is. A couple of thoughts that I would share is number one, from sort of our our the beautiful tradition that we have in our Deen, is that to remind ourselves, and I'm going to speak to myself first and foremost, is
okay,
that nothing is purposeless. Everything comes from Allah. Allah's in charge. Allah is fully aware of our circumstances. Undoubtedly, I mean, we are suffering, to varying degrees. Allah is aware of the trial and tribulation we're going through. But I think it's about reminding ourselves that there is meaning and purpose behind whatever Allah in His infinite wisdom is making us go through, right? Some of us may be blessed and see that meaning and purpose while we're in the midst of the trial, right? And the tribulation of the test. And some of us, after we pass through it, right, some of these things will become apparent to us. But just to remind ourselves, number one. Number two, you're right. I mean, I think we have to go back to the basics, right? Why is it that we pray? There are many people who, mashallah, they have such regular access to the masajid, to the houses of Allah, to the mosques. But I'm going to say two things. One is, there are places that our sisters do not have access to the mosque. And that's
right,
another conversation we have to have, right? And so
right,
they've learned to have lived with, being cut out of, right, spiritual spaces and community spaces. But a lot of the brothers complain, oh, we can't go to the masajid. I understand that, but the beauty of our Deen is we can pray anywhere, right?
yeah,
And so it gets back to, what is the prayer supposed to do for you, and what are you supposed to bring to the prayer, right? The mindfulness, the humility, the love, and the attachment and the connection to Allah. It's not always there for some of us, because iman is like a barometer. It goes up and down, right? At times, some days you're feeling it on the
yeah,
spiritual high, and some days you're in the peaks, and some days you're in the valleys,
yep,
right? But it's that the prayer. Two quick things I'll mention is that the prayer is the forms a bedrock of our connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And we show up even if at times we have to drag ourselves not to show up. Number two is that the more that we make the effort, this is the beautiful hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where Allah teaches us through the noble message of the Prophet ﷺ, is that if we take one step, two steps towards Allah, we have to know and believe in our heart of hearts that Allah is going to close the distance. Right, the Hadith of Qudsi actually says, you take one step towards me, I'll take two steps towards you. You come walking to me, and I'll come running to you. Right, paraphrased. That is something that we need to reflect on daily in our spiritual lives. Why is it that how can I move closer to Allah? Prayer is one wonderful way. Dhikr is another wonderful way. Right, our Deen gives us a lot of these tools.
Well, when I don't know how many months in we were doing this program, but I think I got asked some question or the other, and I said perhaps this is one of those reckonings,
Mm-hmm,
and where you're kind of flying blind.
mm-hmm,
You know, the thing that is going to keep your plane on course,
yeah,
right, is both faith
mm-hmm,
and your attention to faith. You don't want to be like the people who missed the boat with Noah,
yeah,
or the people who stayed behind in this place or the other, because
mm-hmm,
you have all of these examples of
yeah,
people missing the boat, the plane, not getting out of the way of their fire, not getting
mm-hmm,
out of the way of
yeah,
the earthquake. But then when we look, we see something about a tradition that resides right with us
mm-hmm,
that is almost ununderstandable, and that's evangelical Christianity.
mm-hmm,
And I'm saying, okay, what could you believe in that would permit this? Why am I under attack from you?
mm,
How, and as you were mentioning earlier, am I going to keep up with minimal hours at work, feeding my family, taking care of my kids, keeping, the old adage, a straight face in front of them, trying to normalize things as possible. And believe it or not, folks are beginning to complain. I have to drag myself to the Quran. Is that a symptom of the reckoning?
I mean, these are beautiful, deep theological questions. I'm not the qualified person to
Yes,
answer
you can.
those.
Yes, you can. I know you.
Yeah. What I would say is that our spiritual tradition, our Deen teaches us that whenever there's turbulence, let's use that word, in our lives, the believer, mu'min or mu'minah, right? The believing man and the believing woman, one of the first questions they ask themselves is, how have I distanced myself or fractured or damaged my relationship with Allah? How have I moved? Right. So there's this beautiful quote from the famous professor, Dr. Timothy J. Winter, right? Also known as Sheikh Abdul Hakim Murad at Cambridge in the UK.
I know him. Yeah.
You know him. I'm sure you know him.
Yeah.
And he has a wonderful series of, they're called the aphorisms, right? The contentions, excuse me. He calls them the contentions, and they're available online. And in many ways, I think they're modeled off the famous, Muslim scholar.
Can you repeat that so we can get it in our ticker for people to have reference?
Sure. So Sheikh Abdul Hakim Murad, also known as Professor T.J. Winter at Cambridge.
M-U-R-A-D, folks.
A-D.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Yeah. And he has these beautiful, pithy, very wise sayings called contentions. So if you Google his name with contentions, you'll see them. And one of the ones he says, I'll just paraphrase, because I've had the privilege and honor of studying some of the contentions with him, and he has hundreds and hundreds. Is he says that, and I'm paraphrasing here because he's much more erudite, is that if you feel yourself being distanced from God, who do you think moved? If I feel myself becoming distant from God, who moved? God didn't move, right? I'm the one that maybe moved away, right? For any number of reasons, right? We're human beings. Ghafla in Arabic is the idea of heedlessness. And we're human, right? This is part of the human condition, is that we have days that we're very spiritually conscious and conscientious, and we're really on point, as they say, with the Deen. And there's times and seasons and days of the year that we drift, right? So the question is, when I'm drifting, I need to be mindful, right? Be aware to say, I want to stop drifting and reorient myself, recalibrate perhaps, right? To fix the temperature, to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And, some of us, we drift through our lives. We become negligent of our responsibilities to Allah and responsibilities to those who have rights upon us, our families, our community, our friends, our parents, and whatnot. So, that's one of the things that I would offer. The other thing that I would say is, along those lines is, so first is to ask yourself, what is going on? It's a very deep introspective question. It can oftentimes, honestly, be a very difficult question to ask ourselves, right? Nobody wants to be that self-critical, right? But to say to your heart, to say to your nafs, to your ego, what's going on in my life? What has changed? Why do I feel more distant from Allah? And then do an assessment. And then, from there, we move forward on how we can repair.
Well, I'm going to take a break, and I'm going to explore what you just brought up. When we come back, we're going to take a moment. This is Professor Omer Al-Deen, and I'm having a deep, deep, deep conversation with Omer Bajwa, and we will be back for Muslim Network TV in a moment.
Billboards are popping up all over the country with an...
Our neighbors don't realize that Muslims are absolutely opposed to ISIS.
Salam. My name is Abdul Malik Mujahid. I'm an imam in Chicago.
16 shots! No me!
No justice!
No me!
So how do we bring up the energy which can really have an impact on the world?
You need to build bridges of understanding among people, and we need to have America moving forward.
That lesson learned brought the strength of humanity to America, which is the diversity.
Mujahid Talks, only on Muslim Network TV. Faithfully connected.
We are back. This is Professor Al-Deen with Omer Bajwa, and we're taking our spiritual temperature. And we ended our last segment talking about how can we measure that. Now, I know you haven't done this in advance, but let's think through a few things we could do to measure that temperature. I think the basic thing is probably drag yourself to do those 5 prayers a day. The second thing that all of a sudden I'm hearing how busy people are. I mean, they're 3 times as busy as they were before the pandemic. And I'm saying, but what are you doing? And when you interrogate people about what they are doing, it winds up, well, I'm watching a little TV, which means I'm watching TV, and I'm just going through the channels, flipping to see what I missed. Well, you didn't miss anything that wasn't there before the pandemic. Women did at least, and probably some men. We spent 6 months cleaning our house, getting rid of stuff that we didn't need, and then we let it all pile back up again. As we hunkered down in fear of the pandemic, we started overbuying. And so, Chaplain, I got to stop some of this craziness. How do I pull myself back from the crazy? And I don't even know what normal is anymore, because I'm sure after all of this is over, we'll still be acting like it's there. But how do I pull myself back from excess?
Great question. One of the things that I'll just sort of start with, and I'll try to give you 3 sort of concrete sort of pieces of advice on that, and that just come to my mind right now from my work. Number 1 is that, a lot of people have been writing, psychologists, therapists, chaplains, religious scholars and leaders, not just Muslim, that, we're going through a collective sort of communal sense of grief and grieving.
Yeah.
And that's why, right? There's this general sense of malaise, of just, I feel very uncomfortable. I can't even put a name to it, perhaps. And that is, maybe another conversation we can have. But I want to start with that and saying that these are abnormal times. And in abnormal times, people turn to different sort of mechanisms to sort of make sense of it. You've named them so like right on the head, right? Where people they've lost a sense of routine in their life. They're over consuming, they're overspending, and all of that. So really practically what I would say 3 things are, we're spending because of circumstances, I'm mindful of that. We're spending way much more time inside than we used to before.
Yeah.
I live in New England. I know you're in Chicago. We're going through a deep freeze right now. I'm very mindful.
Don't mention it. No. Don't mention it, because it'll smell more.
Sorry. So what I was going to say is that generally speaking, right, is that we need to get outside more. We actually need more sunshine. We need more fresh air. We need to get moving. Walking is a sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, to be active, to have an active lifestyle. For different people, different age groups, different circumstances in life, that means something. But let's put it this way. We all need to move more than we are moving right now, or we've been moving for the last many months in the pandemic. Because
we can move in the house, right?
Yeah, we can move in the house. I mean, so the point is movement, right? If you can get out and go for a long walk, I think that's beneficial. But if you can, you can get moving in your house, that's great. But what I'm trying to say is, it gets us away from the laptop, away from the computer, away from the TV, off the couch. We would be amazed to see how much physical movement contributes to or has a positive impact on our mental health and our spiritual health. That's number 1. Number 2, to your point, is I would say that, this trend of overconsumption, of like one-click buying on Amazon and all of that, we, really practically, we need to ask ourselves, where is that like desire for consumption coming from? Am I bored? Do I really need these things? Is it become too easy, one touch click on my phone? And then we address those sort of, right? We dissect that, figure out, well, maybe I need to uninstall that app, right? That one click touch. Maybe I need to really do an assessment of like, what do I need and what do I want? And having a conversation with myself or my family on that, right? Because like you said, we're now drowning in the stuff that we decluttered, 6 months ago, right? And the last piece of advice that I'll give you is that I'll share and give to myself first and foremost is because of the isolation, the physical isolation and distancing, that obviously leads to a sense of emotional isolation from people. And there's all this data coming out now, this epidemic of loneliness that we have across age categories in our society is really, really try to reach out to people. And I understand Zoom, FaceTime, these are not ideal, but they're better than nothing at all, right? And look, we're all on Zoom for work. We're all on webinars for work and professional commitments. But what I mean to say is pick up the phone, call someone, write someone an email. Even better, honestly, if you want to go old school, write someone a letter and see how they feel when someone that you love or care about, when you take the time to handwrite a letter and you put it in the post and they receive it. I mean, this is sadaqah, right? This is sadaqah. Think of it in the sense of like you're bringing, part of our deen is bringing, a cheer and happiness to the face of our community and our brothers and sisters, right? Let me put it this way. If someone sent me a handwritten letter or a postcard or something like that, so I'd say, subhanAllah, that would make my day, right? Who does that anymore? These are simple ways of connecting to people, right? Because there are a lot of people out there that just feel, honestly, they feel neglected, they feel forgotten. They feel that the world is passing them by, right? Some of these are older folks. Some of these are people that they have a community through school, through campus, through their workplace. And because that's been taken away from them now, and you're having mental health effects there. So anyway, these are just sort of 3 tips that I wanted to share.
Oh, no, I love it. We're going to take another quick break. And I want to come back and talk about what we just talked about with reference to class.
Mm-hmm.
This is Professor Al-Deen. I'm with Omer Bajwa, and we're taking our spiritual temperature today. We'll be right back.
Assalamu alaikum!
I love Adam's World because it makes me learn in a fun way. That Adam has a green face and orange hair. I like this song. I like how Adam sings. I like Adam's World because it makes me happy. What? No. And here's Adam and he's Anissa. Adam is and his sister. Adam is a boy and he is very smart.
Download the new Adam's World app at adamsworldapp.com and let's help tomorrow's Muslims today.
This is Professor Al-Deen and Omer Bajwa, and we're taking our spiritual temperature today and thinking about ways that we can get it from low to like 97.5 or 97 or something. And we were talking about things we could do. How does that affect different classes? Mm-hmm. Some people have taken their boats out on the lake to get out of the house. Some people have gone to their houses in the mountains. Mm-hmm. How do communities who can't do any of those things survive?
Mm-hmm. Great question. Great. I mean, I'm reading all about these really kind of sickening stories of people that have these like vacation houses in the Hamptons or God knows where. And the point is that unfortunately, communities of color are disproportionately affected, right, by the lockdown in so many ways. I mean, multiple levels. But what I would say to that is, let's go low tech, right? Low tech in the sense of like, ideally speaking, if you're able to get outside, just walk around the neighborhood, go to the park. I understand many playgrounds are closed and whatnot, or there's certain hours limited. But I would say, let's get back to the basics. Just walk around the neighborhood. and for what it's worth, I will mention personally, that's something that my family and I have been doing, and with the close friends that we potted with through the pandemic. And you meet your neighbors like never before, right? You see people just walking in the neighborhood because we live too much of our lives inside. So now I'm meeting neighbors that, they've been on the same street with me for years, and I haven't really seen them, but you walk by, you wave, you hello, you ask how you're doing. And, this is, I think, a low tech, manageable way of getting outside, even just in the local neighborhood. That's what I would say, is get outside and whatnot. And if you're able to, right, if there are more sort of recreational areas in your city, in your town, when it's appropriate and safe, of course, is to get out and do that. And literally, put on a pair of shoes, grab a coat, grab your mask, say Bismillah, make the dua when you leave your house for protection, and then get some fresh air, work up a sweat.
Well, the other thing that was mentioned to me the other day, I'm here in Chicago, and we have a bunch of halal supermarkets. They are not set up for delivery. What do I do?
Mm-hmm.
It's like my world is caved. The nice little world I built where I can drive, pick up a bunch of meat, throw it in the freezer, is now not quite available.
Sure. Great question. Very practical question. What I would say that to your listeners, inshallah, as an opportunity for sadaqah and for khidmah, for charity and for service, is that my teachers said this beautifully, is that they said one of the opportunities that Allah is presenting to so many of us, especially those of us that are younger and more able-bodied and have access and mobility outside, is look to people in your neighborhood, your immediate neighbors, right? There's so many hadith that talk about hukuk al-jar, the rights of your neighbors, right? Ask your neighbors, do you need anything? I'm going to the grocery store. I will do, on Saturday, I will go and run any errands that you need me to run. I'll drop things off. I'll pick things up for you. I'll come to your door, curbside, drop off, delivery. And we do it from a sense of khidmah, of a sense of service, to please Allah, to be good to our neighbors and to fulfill their rights, so that Allah is happy with us if our neighbors are, taken care of. These are great opportunities, especially to the youth, I would say, to invite them to look for people in their community to help.
Well, that's a great point, because many in American society don't think of us as charitable people. We live in little ethnic bubbles.
Yep.
We put on all these clothes and we stay away from people. We don't know our neighbors. We don't talk to them. So this is a time for us really to get reacquainted with some basic principles in the faith of Islam.
Absolutely. There's so much to say on that, is that, the beauty of our deen is the simplicity of our deen, right? It goes to the essence of what it means to be a upstanding, upright, person, to be to call to righteousness and to do righteousness, to be of benefit to others, right? And to bring benefit into the world. This is so much of the akhlaq, right? The character, the moral, ethical character that our Prophet ﷺ beautifully taught us about.
Well, that's one of the driving forces behind Muslim Network TV. So our vision, looked out and said, oh my goodness, this is an opportunity for people to hear from us, to hear our perspectives on things, for us to enter into the conversations of the day and to talk to each other about our faith. So this all works together, and I'm back to my temperatures. We're below. Is there a time frame? Is there some measurement I can use? What am I going to do to know that I'm reconnecting?
It's a good question. Well, we'll speak about generally, and then we'll talk about maybe how to adjust that in COVID, right? Generally speaking, our scholars, men and women of spiritual leaders, teach us that there's Allah, the Prophet taught us that time scales, sort of maybe use that expression, is that from one Jummah to the next, right? From one Ramadan to the next, right? Is that how, what's the state of our heart? What's the state of our homes? What's the state of our mental, spiritual health, right? from year to year, from month to month, from Juma to Juma. And then if you want to, really kind of fine tune the microscope here, it's really from one prayer to the next, right? How am I feeling from the time the last prayer I prayed to the next prayer? Generally speaking, I think these are useful metrics that we use. In a COVID kind of world, there's sort of a discombobulation, to use that word, where the time seems almost elastic, right? Where we're kind of like,
it is. Oh my God.
It's a different concept where we're not going out to the masajid, we're not going to our regular commitments and whatnot, to Juma for that matter, in many places. And so what I would say there, kind of just kind of a simple piece of advice, two pieces of advice. Number one is go back to the core, which is from one prayer to the next, right? From the last prayer you prayed to the next prayer that's going to come in soon, or that you're going to about to pray, is that, how do you feel between then and now in your connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? It doesn't have to be a profound, it may be, but it need not be a profound shift, right? But at this, it's about the steps that we take, not, it's, as many scholars have said, it's about the marathon, not the sprint. So think about, how am I going through this? Right. The other thing that I'll mention to people, just as a piece of advice, and it relates to the prayer concept, is I, from my teachers, have found the benefit of when you do the dhikr of Allah, right? And the dhikr of Allah can take two very easy forms. One is reading the Quran, which is the dhikr of Allah, which is the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, reading the book of Allah. Either, it's not either or, but I would say in the Arabic as well as in translation with what you're comfortable with. And then also sitting down and just making a few minutes of conscious, mindful remembrance of Allah, saying Subhanallah, saying Alhamdulillah, saying Allahu Akbar. This is what the Prophet ﷺ taught his family. This is what the Prophet ﷺ taught his companions. And this is by how we've been taught, 1400 years later, the benefit of that. So, there's a lot of benefit, just as an example, after Fajr, to sit after Fajr for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, right? To pick up a subha, a tasbih, as they call it, if you have one, if you're comfortable with that, and just take the name of Allah, take the blessed name of Allah, say Allah, Allah, Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah, 100 times, and then just make try to be consistent in that habit every day. Inshallah, there will be a tremendous benefit, right? But it takes that little bit of effort, right, to make a habit into a practice into a habit, which becomes a positive good deed, right? There's things that I would say that I believe from our spiritual tradition will have a direct impact on your spiritual temperature.
I like that. I'm sitting here thinking, because I'm noticing that this is one instance where I want to have a fever.
Yeah.
I don't want the other fever, but this is one instance where I want to have a fever. And I'm thinking about, I think I spoke with you earlier, there is at least one. It's Eunice Emery.
Yeah.
I
think it's on one of the streaming channels.
Emery, on Netflix, where in there you have the story of a guy who's a judge who realizes he's memorized all the stuff in the legal canons, and he does his prayer, he does all this, all these things he's supposed to do, but it hasn't touched his nafs, it hasn't touched his soul, so to speak. And he meets this sheikh who manages to wiggle in between the spaces left by the law. And I find myself, because there are 2 episodes where there's a dhikr. And I can interrupt my day and go to the dhikr. Where people are sitting around in a circle, they're speaking Turkish. I don't have a clue as to what they're saying, but I figure it's all good. And separate myself. But I think as we go into what is going to be a second year of this pandemic, we must get it straightened out to survive. What are your thoughts?
No, absolutely. I mean, two things come to mind. One is I absolutely agree with everything that you're saying. We need to think of it's about a reframe in our minds and ultimately in our hearts, right? One of my teachers told me a really profound thing. For me, it was very profound, and it helped reframe this, which is that a lot of us, the way to be very real, a lot of us, the way we were brought up in our communities, from our parents, maybe even from is that they say you have to pray, right? And look, at one level, from a Sharia point of view, we can get into the technicality of the language and whatnot. It's an obligation that you have to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the reframe comes when you get to the age of, or not the age, you get to the point of spiritual maturity and spiritual consciousness. And you say, it's not that I have to pray, it's that I get to pray. Right? That Allah allows me, right? Allah gives tawfiq, Allah gives divine facilitation. He opens doors, so to speak, in my day that I can sit down for 5 minutes, make wudu, open his book, reconnect to him, pray, put my head on the ground in sajda, prostrate to him, to take his beautiful divine name, to say subhanallah, alhamdulillah, for even a few seconds a day. These are divine facilitations, right? We call tawfiq from Allah. To think that it's not that I have to do this, it's that I get to do this. What a merciful, loving Lord that I have that allows me to do this. And that, the other point that I see a question here in the chat. Can mindfulness help raise the temperature? I would say, yeah. I'll respond to that real quick, and then I'll give you one story that I was going to share. Is mindfulness is now a buzzword. I'm very mindful of that. No pun intended. Is that this has really kind of entered our vocabulary these days? And people have asked me, is that does Islam have mindfulness? In fact, we do. It's called muraqabah. Muraqabah is a sense of meditation, and our spiritual tradition has this. Now, I think in the time that we have left, maybe for another show, we can do a deep dive into what muraqabah is. But I would say that muraqabah, that meditation, that awareness, that conscientiousness, that mindfulness will definitely help raise the temperature, because what it is recalibrating your heart to Allah, right? I love the expression you said, this is the one time you wish you had a fever, right? Yep. Fever means like the iman, the love you have for Allah is building up and becoming so powerful that you can, it becomes overwhelming, but not in a negative way, in a positive way. And I'll tell you just something that one of my teachers told me, right? They say about shaitan that, the letter Ain in Arabic, which is very, it's a very powerful letter. And the letter Ain, they say that shaitan was 3 out of the 4 Ains, right? The 4 words that begin with Ain, to just make it very plain. That shaitan was abid. Shaitan was a worshiper before the fall, right? Before his arrogance in front of Allah, when Allah Ta'ala told him in the Quran to bow down before, Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam. He was abid. This is what the scholars say, right? He was someone who had worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was alim. He was a scholar. He was a, he was a scholar who knew, because of his position, right? He worshipped with the angels. He was arif, right? He knew he was close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his position, but he was never ashik. He was never a lover of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He knew the law. He worshipped. He knew the rules. He followed the rules. And he knew why he was supposed to do them, but he didn't want to do them. He didn't love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He didn't have ishq. He didn't have that deep, passionate love, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what's going to motivate you. That's what's going to animate you, right? Or what should animate us, right? Our iman, to keep it strong and healthy and vibrant. And we have to nourish these things. There's no stasis. It's a matter of there's ups and downs, and it takes effort, right, to keep things going on that. So I just to your earlier question. So
no, that's a great thing to think about, because in my household we're every day. What day is it? What is the date?
The 9th, yeah.
What? Oh. When was that meeting? And then to keep busy rather than do the things that raise our temperature. What we do is we incorporate more meetings.
Yeah.
Meeting well into the night, not paying attention to the rights our families have over us. Not watching our tongue. And one of the things that has struck me is the undressing that is happening in commercials. When people are on lockdown, the folk who are crafting commercials are they're past lewdness now. They're on to the unethical. I mean, in any other situation, moms and dads would be writing, "Take this off the air." But because they have, and it's understood, a captive audience, we are watching stuff eyes shouldn't see, and definitely our children's eyes shouldn't see.
Absolutely.
But if we turn off the idiot box, we might be forced to read.
That scares a lot of people. I'll be honest with you. That scares a lot of people is that having to pick up a book and to be with themselves and their thoughts and have to flex their mental muscles a little bit. No, I agree with everything that you said. I would say that the one other point that I'll just mention is that which is also goes to this idea of how we can improve our spiritual temperature. Our Deen is beautiful in that it gives us the idea of boundaries. Right, we have boundaries. We have boundaries of literally hudud, right? The idea of boundaries in our sacred law that we have. We have boundaries between people. We have boundaries. The concept is very strong in our Deen. The challenge is that we're living through a very difficult time right now, where you have the erosion of boundaries. You have the erosion of boundaries between work and private, the public world and the private world, between work and home. You have the erosion of boundaries of the way people talk to each other, the way people relate to each other, and all of that. And this is having disastrous consequences, emotional consequences, mental health consequences, physical consequences, and for that matter, spiritual consequences. And so one solution to that is we need to reclaim the idea of setting up boundaries. And I'll give you a very practical, simple tip that my teachers have shared with me, is that, is setting up a workspace, right? And then when your work is done, putting the laptop away and walking away from that, setting up an amount of time that you're going to take meetings. And then you have a cutoff time. You say, I'm not going to take meetings beyond this. I'm not going to work, right, on Zoom or on whatever it is after this time. Because as you so beautifully said, my family has rights upon me. My body has rights upon me. My soul has rights upon me, right? That I need to make that time to be with my children, to be with my spouse. If you're blessed with that, I need to make time with the people that I live with. I need to make time for my body to do some sort of physical activity. I need to make time for my heart, for my soul, by praying, by doing dhikr, by reconnecting to Allah. And for that matter, I will mention to the last point you made, your mind, your aqal, right? Your intellect has a right upon you, in the sense that I need to make time, like reading articles online, PDFs and whatnot. There's a lot of research that says there's a different sort of sensory cognitive connection that you get with reading a book than you get to reading on a screen. Right? And I'm mindful that for some people, all they have is the screen. They don't have books in their library. They don't have access to these things. But if Allah has blessed you with books, now is as good a time as any. Go walk over yourself, close your laptop, and just be like, I'm just going to go, what do I want to pull out today? And pick it up just for a few minutes, crack it open, and see what you're surprised by.
Well, I think we have chosen a great topic that somebody will work into a khutbah. And I'm going to give you last words.
Oh, thank you. I thank you so much. It's such a timely topic about what do we do with, how do we take our spiritual temperature and how do we reset it? I'll go back to an earlier point that I made, and I'll just try to come full circle with it, is that, what I have learned from our teachers of our Deen, men and women, is that, Allah, we have an incredibly merciful Lord, that at every moment of our lives and different times and phases and seasons of our lives, Allah sends us different things as reminders. And intelligent is the one, right? Spiritually intelligent, mentally intelligent is the one that sees the signs around them, right? That this is an indication from Allah for me to come back to Him, right? To recalibrate, to reset. And so, this pandemic writ large has given us to go back to what we talked about before, we as a society need to have a deep reckoning about race relations, about our economy, about our environment, about our interpersonal relationships, right? About our political chaos and dysfunction and all of that. But it really starts with, I think the Quranic message is, if I may say it from what I learned from my teachers, the Quranic message is it starts with an individual. It starts between me and my relationship with Allah. And then the people that have rights upon me, my family, right? The people that are close to me, and then my elders and my friends and my community. And then we think of concentric circles outward, right? So one of the takeaways from the pandemic is the believer, mu'min or mu'minah, always ask themselves, what do I learn from this? How do I get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with what I'm going through? Right? And the beauty of the Deen, the book of Allah and the sunnah of the messenger of Allah, the beloved of Allah, is that it's all there. We just need to re-access and reconnect with it.
Well, I think you just raised my temperature a little bit, and I will keep pushing. This is Professor Omer Al-Deen. I have spent a very fast hour with Omer Bajwa, and we're talking about, and he put it even better than I had it, recalibrating our spiritual temperature. I want to thank you. Muslim Network TV thanks you. Critical Talk honors you. This has been great. Thank you. And that's all for today, folks. Tomorrow, we'll look at the psychological. Join us.